Julian Edelman went on the I Am Athlete podcast with what's the name? I can't remember. Brandon Marshall, wide receiver for the Jets and Broncos, and he was on that podcast, and Brandon Marshall handed Julian Edelman this card where it had Martellus Bennett's Martellus Bennett's quote about him talking about Jimmy Garoppolo and his injury. And I remember I did a show with you about when Martellus Bennett had his podcast, and he starts bashing Jimmy and saying, Jimmy's this and Jimmy's that. And I was on your show, and then Julian Edelman basically said, he said the story. He said same thing that kind of, Martellus Bennett said, but kind of in a more polite way. But he basically said, Jacoby Brissett hurt his thumb. He had no ligaments in his thumb, and it's hard to grip the ball as a quarterback. And Jimmy Garoppolo was practicing, and then he didn't decide to play. And then Julian Edelman right at the end said, I was kind of upset as a competitor because I put my body on the line every single week, going and game in and game out. Yeah. So for our quarterback kind of not to do that, I get it, for his agent said not to, but Julian Edelman didn't seem too happy about it. He was definitely more polite than Martellus Bennett, but he didn't seem too happy about it. So now I ask you this question. Is Julian Edelman right about Jimmy Garoppolo?
That's a tough question. I mean, that's a loaded question. Let me dance around it for a minute. Who might have disagreed with Julian Edelman? Julian Edelman played with him. Julian Edelman's my age. He's a very smart guy, Jewish, from the Bay Area. Who might have disagreed with him? What's so amazing about this whole thing is that this was 6 years ago. I mean, Julian Edelman and Martellus Bennett are still livid to the point where Julian is coming out right before Jimmy Garoppolo is about to get traded. And it seems like he's trying to sabotage whatever market there is for Jimmy Garoppolo. Like any team Cleveland. People are talking about Cleveland traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. They have Jacoby Brissett, right? So they have Deshaun Watson. He could get suspended for the year. Baker Mayfield wants out. That would leave them with Jacoby Brissett as their starting quarterback. Well, what did Julian Edelman say this week? He's saying, I like Jacoby. The entire locker room in New England, and that's a championship locker room, right? They're like the Warriors. We like Jacoby. We don't respect Jimmy Garoppolo. And we don't respect him so much that 5 years later, when he thought this was in his rearview mirror and he thought he was going to get his next payday, we're popping back up and saying, you know what? This guy is unacceptable as a leader of a franchise. The Niners might like him, but we think he's unacceptable, and we're going to try to affect his bottom line, his money. I mean, really, what Julian Edelman's doing right now is aggressive, right? It's kind of outrageous. It's going to affect Jimmy. He's basically saying, hey, Cleveland, hey, any team thinking about investing in Jimmy, don't do it. I highly recommend you don't do it. That's amazing to me. So, I mean, I still haven't answered your question. Is Julian Edelman right about Jimmy G? I mean, let's be fair to Jimmy, right? Like, he played through the thumb injury this year, right? He played through the shoulder. He did it. So, I don't know if he did it in the past. I don't know if he'd do it in the future, but he did it this year, and I have no axe to grind against Jimmy, so Julian does. Julian does. I don't. So I'd have to give Jimmy some credit here. Like, hey, he kind of did what you said he wouldn't do. I don't know if he would do it again, but he did it once.
I mean, can you blame Julian Edelman though? Because I mean, Jimmy did play, with that thumb injury through the NFC Championship and throughout the playoffs. But I mean, what Julian Edelman is saying is kind of true, and I said it when I was on your show. Was that we get mad at Jimmy for the same exact reason, as Martellus Bennett was upset with Jimmy and as Julian Edelman was upset with Jimmy. Because Jimmy Garoppolo has a lot of injuries, right? And he gets hurt a lot. And the Niners fans are like, oh, damn it, another year Jimmy Garoppolo's hurt. Great, our season's pretty much over before we had Trey Lance. So, I mean, Niners fans get upset with Jimmy Garoppolo about the same exact thing. So, I mean, can you blame Julian Edelman? But I got to give props for Jimmy because he did play through the playoffs. He helped us get to the NFC Championship game, or he was the quarterback for the NFC Championship game. So, I mean, he did kind of, prove some of the doubters wrong.
Let's try to be fair to Jimmy because I've been very hard on Jimmy for a very long time, and pretty much everyone agrees with me now, and he's taken a lot of flack, and I feel like it's too much. Man, Julian and Martellus filleting him about stuff that happened 6 years ago, let it go. And I understand from their perspective, like that was a bunch of 30-year-olds on a team trying to win a championship. And they did win it. They beat the Falcons that year in the Super Bowl. That was a championship team. And from their perspective, like Jimmy was a kid and he was thinking about himself and his future when Jacoby was selling out and Brady was selling out and Julian was selling out, because that's the culture. But it's like, okay, I mean, fine, like let it go. Let it go.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago, and Jimmy was a kid, and now he's different, and he's kind of answered those questions. And I mean, I don't like the fact that he can't throw down the field, and I don't like the fact that he can't move or really read defenses. But this just feels like a cheap shot that I wouldn't take on the guy. Because frankly, say what you want about him, he's a nice guy. He's a good guy. He's above this stuff. He's not gonna like clap back, right? He's not gonna be like, oh, what did Julian say? Like, he's basically a pretty I don't know what you want to say. Professional isn't the right word, but he's a good guy. He's a good dude. And I feel like Julian, like, stop. It's a bad look at this point. It was 6 years ago. Let it go. But hold on.
He did.
If the Niners cut Jimmy, don't you get a feeling that Julian Edelman might even like tweet something like, haha, like there are some people that I think we're underestimating just how upset these people are.
I don't know if Julian Edelman would do that, man, because we don't want to spark some controversy with Julian Edelman. I don't know if Julian Edelman might do that, because at the end of the day, Jimmy's still his teammate or was his teammate. But I don't know if you do that to a former teammate. And Julian Edelman doesn't seem the type of person to do that. But I mean, Jimmy did play in the NFC Championship. He played throughout the playoffs. But
I mean, to me, doesn't this feel like a hostile? Dude, what Julian and Martellus said feel like hostile acts from former teammates. And I know, like in San Francisco, everyone loves Jimmy in the locker room, but apparently not New England. Not New England. It's hostile, and it's like it's not just they came out and were emotional about it. 6 years later, that's wild and cold. Yeah. Right before he's about to be on the market, that's extra cold. I mean, wow, it's petty.
Yep.
Yeah.
It sure is. I mean, Niners, you said it also. I mean, the Niners, Niners players don't really have any issues with Jimmy. All of them are like, Jimmy's a great leader. Jimmy's that. Jimmy's a great quarterback. And, you never hear I haven't heard any Niners players so far talk and say anything bad about Jimmy Garoppolo. At least from my mouth, I haven't heard anybody say something bad about him.
But let's wait a couple years and see what happens when he's off the team. Maybe there'll be people holding grudges 6 years down the line. I kind of feel bad for Jimmy. He takes a lot of flack. He does take a lot of flack. And what is his biggest flaw? Being mediocre, pretty much. He's just kind of mediocre. Sorry. Oh well. Yeah, you're right. You're right, David. He's worse than mediocre in the playoffs. That's the truth.
He's not going to be able to win the big game, and I don't want to go into further topics because I'm going to spew my other things for the other topics. But I mean, he can't win the big game. He just can't, right? And I mean, even in that Super Bowl, he just can't.
No, but here's the way I look at it. I mean, the way I look at it is like a lot of times in a lot of sports, baseball, football, people can come on the scene with limited skill sets who aren't necessarily superstars, but have early success because they do certain things well. And the rest of the league hasn't figured you out yet. They don't really know what you do. The book isn't out on you. But as you play more, I mean, Jimmy was this phenomenon where he's like 28, 29, and he's like a rookie. No one knew his game. But as he played more, it was like, okay, you don't throw deep. You don't throw outside the numbers. You don't move. You pretty much lock onto your first target and just fling it just to get the ball out of your hands in 2.5 seconds. Once the book was out on Jimmy, it was clear he was a liability. He is an interception waiting to happen. And the way that Kyle worked around it was, let's run the ball as much as possible. Let's have as many like safe throws, like screens and this and things. But I mean, at a certain point, 3rd and 7, you can't avoid it. Right. And that's who Jimmy is. The book's out. That's why they can't trade him at this point.
I mean, I think part of Jimmy, obviously we saw him in 2017, right? I think Jimmy was in 2017. I was a huge Jimmy fan, right? Because you saw Jimmy do things in 2017 that you just didn't see him do the last couple of years, right? Jimmy in 2017, there was one specific throw I remember to Trent Taylor where he's rolling to his left and he sidearms it to Trent Taylor in the end zone, right? Those are things that Jimmy used to do. And even in 2018, Jimmy would sometimes scramble. Not often, but Jimmy would scramble sometimes for the first down. But then I feel like after he got injured, Jimmy just was never the same again. Where Jimmy on that play where he got hurt against the Chiefs and he started running and he got hurt, then what happens in 20 when he comes back off of injury, Jimmy wasn't the same. Jimmy wouldn't run. Jimmy would hold the ball. Jimmy would kind of freeze in the pocket and take sacks. So I feel like Jimmy after the injury wasn't the Jimmy that the Niners expected when they gave him the $100 million contract. Wasn't the Jimmy that we saw in 2017. It was a complete opposite.
I agree, but even before he tore his ACL, he had this crazy winning streak, and it felt like, I don't know, it felt like it's probably before your time, but Linsanity, Jeremy Lin, he was like the superstar for a couple of months.
3 weeks. I think it was like 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks.
Yeah, and it was like, you're not this. How are you doing this? And there's been these moments in sports where players can sort of perform above their skill level for a month or two, or a couple of years. And Jimmy did that for a while. Like, you could watch him, and it's like, man, he doesn't throw that hard. He doesn't move that well. Like, there's nothing he does exceptionally, but he's 16-2. How?
Yeah.
And like,
I think that's because of the situation that he's in. Because he's with Kyle, who game plans around his strengths, runs the ball a lot, doesn't make Jimmy throw the ball, deep down the field, right? So I think a lot of that credit goes to Kyle Shanahan for scheming up a game plan where you can win with Jimmy Garoppolo.
That's true, but it's also just defensive coordinators not being exposed to him. Like, once there's data, they'll figure you out. And when I was talking to coaches about it back 2017, they would point to like different sports, especially baseball is a big one, because as a hitter, you have the advantage until pitchers have data on you, until they know what you can and can't. Well, that's the way I look at it. And what they would say is like, look at Willie McCovey back in the 60s. His rookie year, he hit 354, Hall of Famer, never hit that ever again. That was the best year he ever had, his rookie year, because you have a great year. You put the league on notice. They see what you do. They see what you struggle at. They try to work on what you struggle at. And it's like a constant battle of, I've established a weakness. They attack it. Now I've improved on it. Now there's a new weakness. And that's, if you can do that, you'll end up being a Hall of Fame player. Jimmy couldn't. Once there was some data on Jimmy and there were some defined weaknesses and people could attack those, it was over. It was over. And that's why another guy crowning him early on. It's like, man, this dude has played like a season and a half. Look at someone like Kirk Cousins or Derek Carr. Those guys have played a lot of games and people have kind of written them off, but they've come back. Like, let's see Jimmy do something like that,
Mm-hmm. Speaking of another guy like Linsanity, I don't know if you know who Doug Flutie is.
Yep.
Yeah, Doug Flutie had that stint with the Bills right before he was about to retire, and Doug Flutie made that team a playoff team. They beat the undefeated Jaguars at the time. I mean, Doug Flutie kind of turned around that team. Sad what happened to the Bills, because I mean, I don't want to go into details, but man, they benched Doug Flutie against the Titans in the AFC wildcard game, but I think it was Rob Johnson who they were giving a bunch of money to. And they don't play Doug Flutie, and it was like, what? And then now when I first heard that, I'm like, dude, what was going on in the Bills' mind? Like, imagine someone doing that now, like, let's say a Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or someone like that, and then you bench them for the backup, like Nathan Peterman, and you're like, what? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But
yeah, I remember that. That was a long time ago.
Yep.
That was before you were born.
Yep, that was 1990 something. Yep.
That was like 99, 2000, something like that.